affect really anybody. Welcome. Thanks for showing up to the town hall meeting for District 5 Toastmasters. Our topic tonight is milestones for mentors. We'll be talking about what new clubs need and what mentors do for new clubs, and maybe some new activities about how the district wants to track what's happening in new clubs so that they can get really strong really fast with your help. All right, first, my name is John Newley. For those of you who haven't met me, I am an Austin Toastmaster, and I'm currently serving as the Austin Chair for Sponsors and Mentors. For those of you who don't know this process very well, sponsors are the people that get new clubs started and get them charted. And during that process, we try to get mentors involved in that process so that they can take over and help that club get ready to go and help connect them to the resources that they need and help officers train all sorts of activities that mentors are going to do for clubs in their first 6 months to a year. So let's go ahead and get started. Just a couple of housekeeping items. It's probably best for everybody if you just keep your phones on mute for now. If you want to say something, go ahead and chat in using the chat bar, or go ahead and unmute and just blurb out a question. I'll recognize you, and I'm happy to take time for discussion in particular slides. Know that the slide deck will be available, and hopefully, if we can work things out, the recording will be available too. So we'll see what resources we can make available on the district site or by some other mechanism. All right, let's get started. Any questions before we get started? Okay, here we go. Okay, so new club mentors. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the mentorship process for new clubs, I want to talk just a little bit about our value proposition. Mentoring is a big job, and there are lots of things involved, as you'll see tonight. So I want to talk just a little bit about what's in it for you, because anything that brings value to you as a Toastmaster, you're probably going to be willing to do. And I think this is a super area that you can have lots of fun in. And so I'm encouraging everybody within the sound of my voice to go ahead and volunteer, and I'll help. Susan and I will help map you to a club to get started at some point over the next year. Okay, first, I haven't done this before, and what I'm finding is that networking within new clubs is a tremendous way to meet some really interesting people. New clubs are sprouting up all over town, and particularly the newest clubs I've been involved in seem to be just chock full of people who have interesting lives, not unlike most Toastmasters clubs, but they're really enthusiastic about having a new club and getting started and getting off on the right foot. So just like new babies are fascinating for most of us, they need lots of help. And we need somebody to be around, not just when the baby is born, when it charters, but also to help it grow, to help make sure that it's staying out of dangerous places and isn't doing things that are going to cause harm to itself. There's lots of common sense that club mentors can provide to new clubs. We have to put on a particular mindset, because new clubs, think about when you were starting out. There are all sorts of things that are assumed knowledge in our heads, and we don't think about it all the time. We just know that we know it. And for most Toastmasters, especially new Toastmasters and new clubs, they don't know any of that. And a lot of it is not intuitive. There are many things that healthy clubs do because they've learned it over time from good people. And oftentimes new clubs don't have that knowledge base, and club mentors have to be qualified enough to provide that. So we're looking for people that hopefully have their ACB and are looking to fulfill one of the major requirements of Advanced Leader Silver. One of those requirements is to spend 6 months to a year as a club coach, a new club sponsor, a new club mentor. So this is a great way to do it. One of the things that we're going to ask of you, this is a requirement, you have to be able to demonstrate your empathy and your expertise. Empathy just means you're putting on somebody else's hat, walking in their shoes, remembering what it was like not to know everything about Toastmasters. The people we're selecting for these roles are experienced Toastmasters. Their expertise they should be able to bring to bear. When you combine both of those things, you're really truly leading. One of the things that I don't know how much this has changed from past years, but certainly this year we're really trying to make sure that new clubs have not just one mentor, but two. So you'll be working with another club mentor to the extent we can possibly make that work to help a new club grow strong. All right, overview. So what does a mentor need to do to help get new clubs strong? As I said, we're assigning two mentors to take over care of our new baby from club sponsors as the club charters. So at charter, the club sponsors are freed up to maybe start another club, while the club mentors take over and really foster the normal activities of the club. That shared responsibility allows all new club meetings to have at least one mentor present. It's not easy sometimes to have, to get across town to a meeting. It's hard to expect that a mentor is going to be at every club meeting. We feel if we have two mentors involved, they should be able to coordinate to make sure that meetings get covered. And that's particularly important in the first few months of the club life, where developing quality meetings is probably job one. So our goal, help new clubs establish effective meetings, effective officers, effective processes. And we want that result to be a strong club. Lift that weight, baby. Okay, mentors are going to work with sponsor and mentor chairs to track club progress in 7 areas, 7 critical areas, and we're going to review those in the next several slides. And there's a minimum 6-month commitment for this. We'll take a look at what you're doing in 6 months, and we want to, Susan as the San Antonio chair and myself as the Austin chair, want to keep in close touch with what's happening with mentors in their clubs and track their progress over time. So we'll talk in some detail about the kinds of things we want to make sure mentors are doing in their clubs, the kinds of things we want to pay attention to, the kinds of activities we want to make sure happen for mentors in clubs. Okay, so we've got a set of milestones, and I think of milestones as kind of the milepost by the side of the road indicating you've gone some distance. So I'm not implying that all of our milestone areas, we're going to go through 8 of them actually. And the first milestone we have is, I don't mean to imply that all of these milestones can't be worked on at the same time, because most of them can and most of them should be. But I've listed them in 8 areas so that, one, this is kind of the way we want to be able to form conversations between the district, the sponsor, mentor chair, and the mentors themselves. So think of this as the next 7 or 8 slides as kind of a checklist of some things that you should be doing. And when we check in to check on the progress of the club, we'll use a tool at the end that will help us kind of track our progress toward milestones. So the first one is really the new club kit. Some very wise people in the district have put together a box, a container of stuff for new clubs. And I'm not going to drain, this is a lot of text on this slide, I'm not going to drain all of the items in it. The main takeaway point for this slide, the new club kit has pretty much everything you need to run a club meeting, even if you have lots of inexperienced Toastmasters in it, as will be the case for lots of new clubs. So there are scripts for every role. The artifacts you typically find and need to carry off a club meeting of high quality are right there for the SAA to use. The sponsors, we give these materials to the sponsors to use to have the demo meeting and the first several meetings of the club until they charter. When the club charters, this new club kit belongs to the sergeant at arms and the new club. And so it gives them kind of a running start. They don't have to gather materials to create a good meeting. There are also lots of how-to information in the new club kit. So, how to make a good guest folder. There are table topic ideas, meeting themes ideas, ways to sign up for roles, even a new member orientation kit. So the first things that a club has to do, create a quality meeting, this should really help them with that. Question from Pebby also suggests that manuals, we'll talk about some of those. Those are all good suggestions, Pebby, and if I don't address one of those areas as we go through our milestone list, tag me at the end and we'll talk about them. Because there really are probably suggestions that you'll have as a mentor in a new club that aren't on our milestone list, and we'll probably discover some things that you think are important that aren't on our checklist. Maybe we should add them. Any other questions about this one before I go on? All right. Okay, our milestone number 2 is teaching lectern etiquette. So this is something that's really not intuitive to most new Toastmasters. And if you're in a club where these things happen, you've got experienced Toastmasters and they know lectern etiquette and they're good models, it's really easy to pick up. People pick it up unconsciously and they start doing things right because they're just modeling other people's behavior. But in a club that's mostly new Toastmasters, which is lots of new clubs, they don't know anything about this. And they typically don't follow lectern etiquette, or they ignore it, or they do it once and then don't do it again. So think about what you do when you introduce other speakers. I mean, the fact that you actually introduce other speakers, that's a real key Toastmaster concept. How do you behave when you approach the lectern? What do you do while you're speaking there? How do you hand it off? How do you behave differently when you're accepting an award or giving an award? How do you behave while you're in the audience? There's a handout on lectern etiquette in the new club kit, and it's very useful, and chances are most of you as experienced Toastmasters have already internalized this behavior. But one of the things that's going to be really important as a mentor is that you don't just demonstrate it, you ask them to demonstrate it to you, and you ask them to demonstrate it to you until they've perfected the skill. So typically my experience here has been, I see a few people do it right, and they pay a lot of attention to it, and that's the norm you want to recognize and support, and then it catches on. But you'll probably have to actually bring it up and talk about it. That's kind of the point of this milestone. Any questions about lectern etiquette? Okay, mentor milestone 3. This is the manuals, Pebby. Yes, these are really important. We want to make sure that the club understands how to use the CC manual. And we want to so the first several points here are just the things that a Toastmaster does when they're about to give a speech from the CC manual. You know, what to do to make sure your speech is, the Toastmaster knows about it, your evaluator knows about it, you document the manual speech that you're using, you have the VP Ed sign off on it. And hold on, I'm just recognizing, so especially since Pebby can't speak, let me unmute you, Pebby. Pebby, can you talk now?
Yes, I can talk.
Okay.
I could have unmuted myself.
Okay, that's fine. I'm sorry about that. I was getting a lot of background noise out of your line, and so I wanted to at least mute you until we got through the initial. But go ahead and pipe up. Ask me your question.
Well, my comment earlier wasn't actually to put in the manuals, but the manuals that I was referring to was the Master Your Meetings, the Chairman,
Yeah.
and the Table Topics one.
Okay.
That is great information. If I would have had that 3.5 years ago when I first started as Toastmasters,
Okay.
I can't say I would be any better than what I am now, but it would have been easier for me to get more comfortable quicker.
Sure. So we'll talk about some of that as we go on, and I totally agree. There's content that you as a mentor know about that can give people a running start. And if chances are, if you've experienced something and it worked in your club or it worked for you, this new club needs to know about that.
The thing about it is these were never even mentioned in my home club. I discovered these on TI's website,
okay,
going through the manuals, and I'm saying, oh, let me check out that one, and I happened to order it, and it's like,
really good, huh?
This, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's the kind of thing we want mentors doing in clubs. And it's, you know, the kinds of things Toastmasters and new clubs have problems with really vary from club to club too. So, you know, you have to pay attention to what the club needs. And if you think there's content out there that is useful in the club, you know, you're the pipeline to to their knowledge base. So make the suggestion. And if there's a way to work that in here that's logical to this presentation, I'll certainly figure out where that goes in best, okay?
Okay, great.
So some of the things Linda mentions maybe we might want to hold questions till the end since we're recording. I'm not terribly worried about that, and I don't mind having a discussion during the middle. If you want to wait till the end, there'll certainly be time for questions. I don't have enough I don't need to fill up the whole hour with content here, and we definitely have time to have some Q&A and back and forth. Okay, so with respect to the CC manual, the main thing is we want to make sure you recommend that especially new Toastmasters go through the projects in sequence. There's a build logic for that manual that really works, and people that kind of skip around in it without intent really miss that. Describe what do you do after your first CC manual. You're going to want to describe the education track and what's involved there. Later, as the club gets a little more mature, we're going to want to talk about how an individual's progress through manuals relates to the DCP and relates to club success. Probably don't want to cover that in your first couple of meetings, but at some point you want to get there. Connecting individual behavior to club success behavior, that's really important. Okay, milestone number 4, not surprisingly, the CL manual. One of the things, as an area governor last year, I noticed the distinction between healthy clubs that are really going gangbusters and clubs that are often having problems often boils down to manual discipline. Who's doing manual speeches, which clubs are actually, most of their members bring their CL manuals every week. Remind them, bring the CL manual to every club meeting, model the behavior by bringing yours. You know, when you substitute for a role, you can get CL credit. You'll make progress just by showing up at the meeting if you bring your manual. As club member experience increases, you know, you might want to suggest adding a CLE as a role to their meeting. Early on, the general evaluator can write the CL manuals. It's nice as members gain experience, they can start to evaluate each other's CL manuals. Make sure early on to describe, you know, those 2 CL projects that take more time and effort outside the club. So when you look at Project 6, Project 8, those tend to be the kind of tall tent poles to get through a CL manual. And clubs have to plan to figure out how they're going to get members through that. And we definitely have a manual on teaching them how to use, or a handout on teaching them how to use the CL manual. We're going to want you to give a brief meeting presentation on how to use the CC and CL. I would suggest really in every agenda for a new club, making sure there's a mentor's moment on the new club's agenda. So even if someone else is the GE for the meeting, you've got a kind of golden opportunity to give feedback right away about either new information or about things that could have been improved in a particular meeting. Okay, mentor milestone number 5. This may be the most important thing that mentors do for a club. If you can get a core group of officers trained and working together, your club has a much better chance of getting strong quickly. So, you know, connect those officers to training events. Those are held at TLIs and COTs twice a year. It's really, really important that new officers and new clubs get to those right away. Once you have an officer corps all set at charter, go ahead and hold an officer induction ceremony. That shows the whole club, you know, these are the leaders from my club, and if I have questions, here's who I'd go to. You might have to actually consider doing some real hands-on officer training, especially, you know, for clubs that charter early in the year and may have to wait for any kind of COT or district officer training. That may be the most hands-on task you have to do with a new club right away. Outside the club meeting, make sure that the officers are meeting on a regular basis. So you need to attend their executive committee sessions so that you can help them figure out how a club is governed. There's a right way to do that. There are lots of wrong ways to do it. And we want you to show them the best practices for how officers get work done together. There's good Toastmasters training on this. We would also love for you to make sure that members and officers go through the training that's available at TMD 55. If there are incentives for doing things as simple as surfing the net to figure out what resources are available from Toastmasters, and those are really important to point new members to in new clubs. Really very important to make sure that officers at one of their first couple of meetings start to understand the Distinguished Club program, because when they do, they're going to start mapping their members to goals in manuals, and that'll make the club instantly more successful because they'll be working the program. And we know from experience, I know from direct experience, that clubs that work the program are successful, and clubs that don't do that or only work part of it tend to be much less successful. So get them familiar with the DCP, help them create their first club success plan. If they do that, get the area director involved, and make sure that that's a giant milestone to celebrate for a new club, because it is. I worked with lots of established clubs that really don't put together a good one, and they suffer for that. Any questions about officer training coordination as a milestone? And also mention it, if you've got officers and they need you have a special training circumstance, Amy Espinosa is here to help club quality, and she recognizes this as critical too. Okay, milestone number 6. Recall is public relations, guest, and new member processes. Now that's a mouthful, but think about what the major problems that most clubs I've found have involves one of these 3 things, because either they're not doing any more outreach than word of mouth, and so they don't get many guests, or they get guests and they don't treat them in ways that make guests want to return, and so they don't get new members. And the key in this milestone is showing the club that there are some really good ways to do this and to figure out the ways that work best for their club. Here's where empathy is involved, because all clubs are different, and things that work in one club aren't going to work well in another. The first thing, public relations process. We've got lots of tools we can use for new clubs to do outreach on the web, to develop a website or a blog, whatever. There are lots of ways to use those tools to generate leads and to create guests, but how that's used is going to differ across clubs. Susan and I and Linda can connect you with experts and resources in this area. So in particular, I know a lot about Free Toast Host, and it may be the quickest way for a club to get a website up that's really easy to maintain. And you connect that to a Facebook group, and all of a sudden you're doing marketing 24/7, and you don't even know that you are. And it can be really, really helpful to a new club. It's really important to make sure that you review the new member application with the VPM, secretary, and the treasurer. It's a kind of a confusing application, frankly, for new Toastmasters, and for somebody that just walks in the room. They're not going to fill it out correctly without some guidance, and officers need to understand the kind of ins and outs and whys of why that thing is structured that way. So make sure that when it's time for them to bring on a new member, they can do everything they need to do. Clubs need to have a guest follow-up process, and that can be really simple. It's kind of a standard marketing chestnut is that guests are going to hear about a club, leads are going to hear about a club a bunch of times before they decide to actually visit, and you're going to need maybe up to 7 or more contacts across different kinds of communication medium before they decide to join the club. And so what that means is your officers have to constantly follow up. Sometimes it's an email, sometimes word of mouth. There are other ways to do it too, but make sure the club is, if they're fortunate enough to have a guest, they treat that guest well, that somebody from the officer corps is following up with their experience and inviting them back. When a club gets a new member, they need to, or just like they don't know anything now or may not know much, new members will know even less. And until you have some experts in the club that can do new member orientation, it's really helpful to rely on documentation. So take them through Toastmasters 101, make sure new members get the benefit of the more experienced members from day one. A new member induction is a great way for clubs, for VPMs to make sure that new members are being recognized. People know that they're there. People recognize that they need a mentor. So as a club mentor, you need to help your VP Ed make sure they're doing mentor assignment and helping them bring up a mentoring program. That can be particularly important with a new club where lots of the members are new and need some kind of help. Remember that those mentors don't have to be necessarily in the club. If you've got clubs with lots of members, lots of new members, and you want to bring in some help from outside the club to mentor a few people, I can help you set that up. There are often people that are looking to do that across the district. Any questions about all of that? I think that's particularly important for clubs to start the habit of doing outreach and creating new members. Hey, Linda, did you want to say anything there? I missed your note.
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah, you're not muted. Nobody's muted.
We put together a Toastmasters 101 to orientate new members or new clubs to Toastmasters, and we focus on that division, the division director and the area director, so they learn the people that are important in what they do, so that it is the same program, but it focuses in specifically on each division and the area director.
Great. So that kind of brings in the area director and division-specific knowledge, which is really important. Local context can be everything for a new club. They need to be connected to the people that can help them most conveniently. Great idea. Okay, milestone 7, assure club quality. So that's a big task, and there are some things in the kit that can help with this. First, our recommendation is to act as the general evaluator, at least for the first several meetings. You may be the most experienced Toastmaster in the room, and you know what a meeting should look like. And you know when you've seen a good meeting, and you know when you've seen particular events in a meeting that kind of took that meeting off the rails, or something that could have been done differently really easily that would have made for a much better meeting. You don't want to be silent about those things, and you don't want to wait to give that feedback in an email a week later. So really much better just to go be the general evaluator. Here's what I liked. Gosh, we're doing it way better than we started. Here's some tips that I think will serve us in the next meeting. So constructive verbal and written feedback on each meeting, that's really helpful. At some point down the road, you're going to want to do a simplified moments of truth. So the new club kit has moments of truth scripts and handouts for members to fill out. This doesn't have to be complicated. The goal of moments of truth is really for everybody to be honest about the things that the club is strong in and the things that the club needs to improve. And when it's really designed so that all the members have a kind of common vision about where we can put energy in to make our club better. So don't shy away from that. At some point, after a few meetings, talk about it. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. You can do it more than once. It's really pretty easy to pull off. Somebody mentioned this earlier, I think maybe Pebby. As a mentor, you should plan to present some projects from the Successful Club series. Evaluate to motivate, creating a successful club environment. There are others that are really very useful. And if you found that there was something really useful to you as a Toastmaster or as a new officer, present on it. I also would note that in the ALS, you need to do a couple Successful Club series speeches. So now would be a great time to just go ahead and get them on your speaking roadmap and prepare to do them once you understand, kind of the challenges that the club might be facing. Demonstrate some different methods to give effective evaluations. There are lots of them out there, and I think even experienced Toastmasters can use often some perspective on different ways you can give a good evaluation. And once the club officers have actually created their very first club success plan, it's a huge milestone, they should present it. They can do it as a group, and that will really unify the club in what their vision is going to be for the next couple of years and what their major challenges are. And it really gives members a lot of confidence when they know that their officers, they're looking forward into the future and they're trying to improve things where they are. Questions about Milestone 7? Okay, moving on. Milestone 8, bring the fun. So really this is a lot about getting the club to do things that aren't standard. So maybe you don't want to do some of these things right off the bat, but once the club gets good at holding normal club meetings, schedule a golden gavel meeting, see if they can pull that off. Not easy. Train the club to hold an open house. There are district incentives for that every year, and it really can help the club hold and gain membership. Help the club hold its first speech contest. Hosting a speech contest, pulling that off, great way to get people through a CL manual, great way to just help the club increase in its maturity. And get them outside their club. There are lots of things happening all over the district all the time. I didn't really kind of feel like a Toastmaster in some sense until, as in my first year Toastmaster, I went to a spring conference because somebody took me along and said, hey, it's really reasonable because you're a first timer, and I had a blast, and so will they. So make sure they're connected to those events. Use your empathy. Think about, what does this club think is fun? I have, kind of a diversity of new clubs, and some of them think a happy hour is great fun after the club meeting. Some of them think that's a horrible idea and don't want to do it because they're all overcommitted and they really are, they want to be in the club meeting and they're not really interested in creating a social group outside the club, at least not yet. So what does this club think it's fun? We've got a new club that they're gung-ho for web design. It's what they do for a living, and they're going to do something special. I can just about guarantee it. Maybe something that the district hasn't seen before, because you get some real experts in that particular club. So bring the fun. Okay, couple minor things. We want to track club progress. So I'm going to change my screen here in a second out of this to go through kind of the Excel spreadsheet that Susan and I are going to use with new mentors over the next year. So the concept here isn't that this isn't a report card per se. Nobody's going to give you a letter grade for this. Think of it as a checklist. Think of it as a really good way to form a basis for discussion between the district, Linda and Susan and I, and the club about how the club's progressing. And one of the things that it enforces is kind of a see one, do one, teach one. So we're going to want you to keep track of, when you demonstrated something, when you had someone demonstrate it for you, and when people are doing it so well that, they can go on. They can teach somebody else now. So in our spreadsheet, I'm going to switch to that in just a moment here. Okay, can everybody see that? Let me go back here and make sure that view looks all right for you. Okay, depending on your computer monitor, this may be a little small for you, but all this spreadsheet is you'll notice that it goes down the milestone areas that I've just reviewed. So think of this as a checklist. Over here, we're just gonna, this is kind of a new club example, and we're gonna want to see a date on the major milestone where you presented it to the club. You assured that something happened. If there's a tool, somebody should know about it. You've described it to somebody, and they should know how to use that tool. So all the spreadsheet really does is it goes down the mentor milestones to say, yeah, these things got done in the new club. And because of that, we're much more likely to have a successful club that's really strong. So the vision here is, this is probably not in perfect final form yet, but it's good enough for me to use with my mentors in clubs. If, we've got a couple of clubs that were, they were charted midsummer essentially. And so probably a lot of this work has been done, and we just need to make sure that it was done. And there are other clubs that are charting right away that are going to be, like this club, maybe just starting out. And they've got lots of work left to do before they're really competent to be a successful club, to be a distinguished club. Okay, Linda, Susan, did you want to add anything?
Nope, I don't.
Okay.
I think you covered it very well.
How about
Yeah.
other questions from anybody else in the audience that I didn't cover or you're curious about?
You mentioned how often do you want to hear from your mentors?
I think for me, what kind of the norm I'm setting with my club mentors is that I want to hear from them at least monthly. So, for clubs that meet, weekly, um, being in touch a little more often would actually help me. So, my plan really is to make sure that that mentors have that spreadsheet tool and that we use that. They use it to track what they've done, and I use it to understand where that club is on a monthly basis. And we can do that on a phone call. I'm actually going to visit Austin clubs as much as I can. I don't want to tread on what mentors are doing. On the other hand, I want to see that clubs are growing and that people are comfortable with what's happening. So I plan to shadow some of them. And I think a lot of that progress can be communicated by email if people are comfortable with that. You want to version that spreadsheet, put in some dates so that people know what's happening. We can have a brief conversation and we're probably done. This shouldn't be something that takes a lot of the mentor's time, but I think it really will help club mentors kind of form a plan of attack for how they want to start tunneling information to clubs, funneling it to them.
Yes, that's very well done, John. One of the future visions of Toastmasters International is that we are the #1 choice provider of those dynamic, high-quality speaking and leadership skills development organizations. And in order to reach that, we need tools such as what you're presenting so that we are in line with what is happening in Toastmasters International. And I think you've done an excellent job.
Good, that's good to hear. I think Toastmasters has been, my Toastmasters Club had such a huge impact on how I approach my work life, how I approach my social life. My club had been around for 30 years when I joined it, nearly. And I benefited from so much expertise that was just kind of in the room. And mentors, it's a kind of an intimidating task, but that's what we're asking mentors to do. We're asking to bring your wealth of experience, bring your connections to other people in the district, so that you can provide that experience to clubs that isn't between their ears yet.
One other comment I wanted to make, going back to the officers, I often suggest to a new club that when they're looking for officers, if they're going to look for a president, have it somebody that's high energy, somebody who's inspirational, just because that person will have an effect, a lot of the attitude, the atmosphere, than someone who is very good at being organized and has passion helping others may be a good person for being a VPE. So just look at the qualities that it takes to be in different officer positions when they ask about that, because I'm often asked about who to choose for officer positions.
Sure.
So you may have that situation come.
And I think, absolutely, I think it often takes some direction from sponsors and mentors to help just describe what the general job description is for the officers. And VP Ed, that may be the critical role for a new club when it's just forming, because that person is you want an organized person that's going to create good processes that are compatible with the club members and that's interested enough in the lives of the club members to understand what the value proposition is for each member. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. You pick the right officers for a club and you get them training, and you've taken a giant step toward getting that club strong.
And Amy, as you mentioned, Amy Espinosa will work with any club because she wants to make sure, even though they get credit for officers training, that we make sure to give them that, at least the TNT and some of the basic major things to tie them to the next official officer training that's available with the district.
Great. Yeah, so there are pieces that, I know the district wants to make sure get done at every officer training, and Amy can help us facilitate that, I'm sure.
Yes.
One thing to, I guess, to mention as well, the Master Your Meetings book
Okay.
has a brief overview of what the officer roles are. It talks about different types of club programs that are themes that they could do, lectern etiquette, a couple sample agendas. All of this, essentially is in a manual that Toastmasters has already published as well.
Great. So I
mean,
think
there's a lot of good information in the slide deck here, but there's, to have something in somebody's hand.
Sure.
Without this slide deck, this would be an excellent manual to include in that club kit.
Very good, Pebby. I will at least add the link to that in my in our tracking spreadsheet. Pointing at resources is one of the things I want to do. Sounds like that's a useful manual. It's kind of up to Linda and others about what gets included in that kit, but it sounds like that's a pretty good candidate.
Yes, and it can be budgeted next year. We didn't budget it this year, and that's where everything ends up in decision making.
Sure.
So we have the money in the budget. So I don't think it's expensive, but they do have the electronic one, and that's fantastic that you send that link to that. And thank you, Pebby.
Yeah, great suggestion. Thanks, Pebby.
This is Livia. I wanted to know, will you be bringing materials pertaining to this at the fall conference?
Will I be bringing materials? I certainly can. I don't know, not sure precisely what you mean. I certainly will be at the fall conference on Saturday, and I'd love to have, time to, any time I can have to convince people to step up to be a mentor, I definitely want to take that opportunity. So let me know what's appropriate, Livia, or what you need.
Yeah, flyers, probably Toastmaster cards, things like that. So
okay.
We can put on the information table. That way, and I'll just contact you and we'll talk more about it. But that would be an example.
Sounds great. I will be happy to help you there.
I had one more thing to say. For some reason, I'm thinking in the new member or new club charter kit, they may have Master Your Meetings and the other one that Pebby mentioned on table topics. I'll have to look and see. For some reason,
you definitely have there's definitely a handout on table topics, and you might be right. I don't recall it being there, but it could be.
There's a handout of like themes, but these particular manuals were not in the club kit that we just gave to the club that I'm a mentor of.
Okay.
I have a couple of those. I can give you on Wednesday night. I have a Master Your Meetings. I'll give it to you for your club kit.
It's Linda. I had 2 copies, and I already gave them one.
Oh, okay.
And I also gave them my the Think Fast Table Topics Handbook and the Chairman Handbook too.
Okay, I have 4 copies of Master Your Meetings if anybody needs any.
Excellent. Any questions from anybody else before we sign off tonight?
Well, this is Glenda. This conversation is a little interesting to me because I had mentioned last week the reason I'm attending these is eventually I hope to have a club in Bastrop, so I don't have to go to Austin.
Yay!
So I'm at some point, I guess, need to talk to somebody, see exactly how that works.
Yeah, so I would, I'm going to let Linda handle that. You know, Linda can put you in touch with the people that you would need to send a lead to, and you know, there's a process that the district goes through to make sure that we're following the leads and creating clubs in the right places. So that's kind of more her topic, but anything you want to add there, Linda?
Yes, just contact me because I'm the club growth director. I can help you exactly with all the details that you need to know.
I'd love to see a club in Bastrop. Sounds like a great idea.
Yes, definitely.
Well, it's either that or I stay late at College Station and do their Wednesday night club, and I really don't want to stay late at the university.
Understand. Okay, last chance.
Do you have my email?
It's also in the deck there, and if you go to tmd55.org, there's actually a link to Linda Oliver's district email alias also. Very good. Thank you all for taking an hour out of your lives tonight to learn a little bit about club mentors. This is a critical role for the district and a critical role for new clubs, and I really encourage all of you to take on the challenge of being a mentor or finding a mentor to help Susan and I out over the next year. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John.